And we're moving on to my presentation, which again is an amalgamation of a number of different facets of presentations we've done over time. And the most important aspect we've been trying to focus on is the success of case studies. So I'm going to set certain scenes for you, and hopefully we can get to a derived example of why collaboration is now the new mission statement in property development and property investment globally. There are certain driving factors that are driving property to evolve at a rapid pace. Strangely enough, these are not necessarily visual changes in property, but they are operational changes that tend to happen behind the scenes. The most important driving factor around these changes, and property hates change. Nothing happened for 40 years. Now all of a sudden we're going through a rapid change. Those of you who understand SANS 10400, the original standards, versus SANS 10400 XA, GBCSA version 2 versus 1, the world is evolving and changing right in front of our eyes. The main cause of this is international financial reporting standards, where tenants are required, and landlords, developers and investors are required to disclose financial disclosure, or IFRS S2, in their financial statements annually. Okay. What does this disclose? This is climate-related physical risks to operation. They're required to state that. So if you're in a farming game, that would be floods, that would be droughts, that would be transportation of commodities. In the mining game, that could be a number of other different things that come into play. But those are the physical risks involved with climate change on our business. The next step is climate-related transitional risk. How are we going to transition to what we refer to as a net zero economy? Who understands what net zero is? Not many. Complete carbon reduction in our operational cycle. Easier said than done. When you understand that your major electrical supply in this country, being Eskom, is completely coal-powered. How do we get off Eskom power and green up our infrastructures as a business? IFRS then sets out the requirements for disclosing information about the entity's climate-related risks and opportunities. In particular, IFRS S2 requires an entity to disclose information that enables users of general purpose and financial reporting to understand the governance process, controls and procedures the entity uses to monitor, manage and oversee climate-related risks and opportunities, the entity's strategy for managing climate-related risks and opportunities, the process the entity uses to identify, assess, prioritize and monitor climate-related risks and opportunities, including whether and how these processes are integrated into and inform the entity's overall risk management process. And the last one is the entity's performance in relation to its climate-related risks and opportunities, including progress towards any climate-related targets it has to set and any target it's required to meet by law or regulation. Okay. What does this determine? How sustainable your business is, how investable your business is. ESG ratings are now becoming fundamental to the operation and investability of commercial assets or listed assets on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange. You go, companies are required to disclose how they are going to meet carbon reduction strategies and tell the world this is what I'm going to do, and then they are judged on whether they do it or not. How sustainable is our business? Authorities, FTSE Russell, GRESB, Sustainalytics, independent organizations that rate your ESG statements, your S2 statements in the market to give you an investable rating tool. Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, as far as I understand, that has been shut down. But it was a fundamental industry in driving change, and then MSCI reporting on benchmarks against which you can analyze the business. How investable and how driven is that business to achieving climate reduction strategies in line with Paris 2030 and 2050 reduction targets? What does this have to do with property and BIM? Hopefully you'll find out shortly. Companies are required to create a vision and a purpose and to put statements out in the market to be truly efficient, resilient and smart in the way we plan, design and operate a portfolio, including cities, infrastructure and buildings both now and in the future. Year-on-year improvements in consumption performance against baseline through the implementation of initiatives aimed at reducing the cost of occupation, carbon footprint and the achievement of reduction targets. Companies are required to state this, and if you don't achieve it, what happens? Your ESG rating goes down. The ability to invest in your business goes down. And if you're a real estate investment trust, for example in our game, that's development and investment, people can't invest in you because their money should be spent elsewhere on achieving reduction targets. You set the targets, you develop the key initiatives required, you state what they are, you investigate the feasibility of each of these initiatives, high, medium and low, and you implement the initiatives as you have disclosed. Huge change. But how do you do this with foresight? You need to model. You need to understand what you're dealing with, and you need to look back at the world with 2020 vision. Legacy model. I've added something to this. CRE value, or commercial real estate value, is no longer just about where the building physically is. It's about what it can become. Location drives value under the legacy model. Performance and deliverability drives value. And we'll get into why this becomes important shortly. Large central HQs as default. Targeted ESG and aligned hubs with hybrid functionality. Grade B space discounted but lettable. Important now. Grade B space stranded unless strategically repositioned. Properties will become untenantable in future unless you do something about it. Rents follow postcode and prestige. Rents follow compliance, flexibility and occupier utility. Retrofitting is optional. Retrofitting is essential. The world is changing and we need to keep up with that as developers and as investors. I'm going to set a bit of a time frame, and those of you who have been through the GBCSA version 2 of the new rating standard will understand what I'm getting at here. The way a city and an office is designed affects your stress levels more than you think. If you think that an urban design is just about aesthetics, glass towers, clean sidewalks and well-placed benches, ladies and gentlemen, I have news for you. Urban design shapes your mood and behavior, and even your productivity. A narrow alley makes you walk quickly. A tree-lined street makes you breathe and relax. Chaotic intersections spike your stress. A quiet courtyard makes your mind slow down. Some cities make people feel at ease, others keep them in a consistent state of alert. Who's been to Barcelona? That's just ease. You just ease. Who's been to New York? That's chaotic. Okay? Wide sidewalks, greenery and shapes, spaces, low anxiety. Walkable streets increase casual social interaction and reduce loneliness. Clutter, noise, space creates mental fatigue, even if you're just passing through it. And then there's invisible stresses that come in with it. Constant noise. Bad lighting, danger. Poorly designed parks and plazas create isolation even in a crowd. And that works the same way in office spaces. If you want tenants in your office space, you need to start meeting the behavioral requirements of your tenants. Good urban design works in the background. You don't notice when it is done well, but you feel when it's not. So next time a space makes you feel off, pause, look around. The city or office environment may be shaping your emotions more than you think. What's one urban space that makes you feel instantly at ease? I'm going to give you some local examples. Santon Gate, Melrose Arch, Santon Square, Waterfall. Why? They're designed around fundamentals that meet all of these objectives. That's why we have pockets of excellence. Santon, not so much. But these are being enforced by statutory compliance as well. Okay, we now get back to the detail. SANS 10400XA version 2, which has been around for a little while, has driven electrical demand down from 200 kilowatts per square meter to 80 kilowatts per square meter. Okay? That's a reduction of about 60%. You look clever. About 60% electrical consumption per square meter. With clever design and management, we've been able to achieve 32 kilowatts per square meter. 25% of the original allowance. Why? Because we designed buildings around different fundamentals. We approached the design requirements differently. In a post-COVID world, and though it feels like ages ago, it was a fundamental shift in property. Post-COVID world, tenants are focused more closely on gross cost of occupation. So how much does it cost me to physically be in this location? That's electricity, lights, water, rates and taxes. We'll go through that just now. The employee experience, and the reason why I brought around closed streets, all of these sort of things. People are worried about the employee experience. Why? Because they want to provide something to their employees at the office that they can't get at home. Who loves going to work? Getting in the car, driving for 2 hours in traffic. What am I going to get on the other side? Good coffee. Good coffee's good enough to get me going. Efficient utilization and functionality of operation of commercial office space. They don't want to pay for stuff they're not going to use. Who's been into the Discovery building? It's incredible, eh? You look up and wow, look at this. Can you imagine how much it must cost to air condition that space? Yeah? Large atriums, big open spaces. Sorry guys, that's dealt with outside. Inside, efficiency is prime because we want to utilize that space to the maximum of our potential. Developers, investors and landlords then have to reduce the gross cost of occupation through design improvement. Okay? Changes. Create flexibility and adaptability of office spaces to meet changing demands. Okay, in COVID, who was involved in COVID and all of a sudden tenants said, I want to halve my space. You know how costly it is to halve a space that's never been designed to be halved. And how much GLA you lose in that process. You've got to provide adaptability within the building spaces. Improve the tenant experience, reduce the clutter, reduce the inconvenience, maximize somebody wanting to come to work. Who knows that the biggest single cost to a company other than salaries is office rental? And if nobody's there, hang. We opened the Deloitte building, 42,000 square meters, prime COVID. Day one, COVID was declared, 1st of April. Got to pay as rental. Building was 20% occupied. Really not great. But all the air conditioning was working. And reducing the embodied carbon associated with operating the business. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most important thing because the biggest cost of occupation to a tenant is rental. They need to declare the amount of carbon they use in that building, their scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. That's what it has to do. That's what BIM and modeling has to do with property and why this net zero economy is affecting the way we design buildings so drastically. Then we go back to the operational cost. If you look, and I set up with a pointer. It doesn't work. Maybe it's me. The big problems in the chair, not in the computer. Municipal charges, electricity, municipal charges, which is your water and your sewer, and then the rates and taxes, which is not, you can't do much about. That makes up 62% of your operational costs. Up to landlords to try and reduce the impact as much as possible. We can't do anything to control the rate on the rand. In other words, that's your valuation. How much is your property worth times the rate? Can't do anything about it. We can't do anything about the electrical tariff because in the majority of cases we're an off-taker from Eskom. We can't do much about the water tariff and everybody knows about the water crisis. But what we can do is we control the input factors that go into it. We can reduce electricity and we can reduce water. And we pay less. But not only that, what are we achieving? IFRS S2 reporting standards, improvements for the tenant. The tenant needs to disclose how much water and electricity they're using. We need to design our buildings better to reduce those input factors and soften the gross cost of occupation for the tenant, or the sustainability of the tenant over time. Operational sustainability. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience, well, that comes from poor judgment. I am going to caveat this, however, because this is now looking back at the world in 2024 when we designed something in 2020. This is the Mall of Africa. Who's been? Who spent lots of money there? It's a wonderful mall, and we worked very closely on this mall for a long period of time. This is the ETFE section, which is the central core of it. This is where people gather. This is where the restaurants are, where your big fancy line shops are, etc., etc. Okay. ETFE are big balloons, by the way. What they do is they contract and expand with temperature, and they control the temperature while allowing natural light into the building. Okay? Makes people feel like they're outside, but they're in a conditioned space. It's fantastic, really is. However, when it was designed, it's designed around 10 days a year above 30 degrees. The modelling and the HVAC equipment designed on base load on the base of mid-range weather station data, 10 days per annum exceeding 30 degrees, 30 days to cool, 30 days per annum within that mall space. So it took 30 days to cool it, and the HVAC systems were then basically designed around that. Okay? Lots of air conditioning, lots of space. However, the actual case, 30 days a year above 30 degrees. The modelling and the HVAC equipment, insufficient to cope with the heat load. Moving the ambient temperature in that space to 27 degrees. What are the impacts on your food and beverage providers? It's unsafe. What is the impact on your heat loads? What do? You throttle the air conditioning to deal with it. Solution. Spend 11.5 million rand of non-income producing expenditure to try and deal with the problem. An additional film was added, reducing the transparency by 25%, so reducing the amount of natural light. What do we have to do that to counter that, to keep occupational health and safety? Add more lights, more heat. And then we had to add more air conditioning to deal with that. The revised specification to cope with 30 days per annum, taking 3 days to cool, 90 days per annum within the mall space, returned it back to 22 degrees, and we were able to occupy the space again. 11.5 million rand for nothing. Solution: build your own weather station. Get granular data. Understand the environment in which you're working. This is the weather station at Waterfall City. Sat on the roof. We just redone the waterproofing. I digress now. So this is where my settings come from. Just redone the waterproofing. Installed the weather station. Raw bolt straight through the waterproofing. Rain straight through. Go up on the roof, see this problem going, oh damn it. Sustainability officer looks at us and says, I don't see the problem. Then you've got water coming in. We've got a sustainable waterfall. Nevertheless, granular data coming through the system allows us to correctly understand the environment in which we're physically working. The environment has such an impact on the buildings, and I'm going to give you these examples now. We then set the science-based targets. This is the declaration we push out into the market. 46.2% reduction in carbon before 2030. Okay? How do we achieve that? Well, we take a base case of an older building, hindsight's 2020 vision, originally designed around 200 kilowatts per square meter because it was based on the original SANS coding, currently operating about 141. Okay, these are 2019 data. Target set 51% reduction. Okay, Going from the base case of 600,000 kilowatts per hour, in other words, how much electricity we're using per annum, down to 307. Okay, that's a reduction of 290 kilowatt hours. It's substantial in terms of that reduction. How did we achieve it? We targeted the big carbon emitters. Energy efficient lighting, 70 carbon unit tons. Demand control, ventilation, 68. Building plug load reduction, 41. Okay? And then, ladies and gentlemen, we put the PV plant on the roof. Do not stick a PV plant on the roof and think it's going to solve your problem. Deal with the issue. It's like putting a plaster on a wet wound. Unless you deal with what's not operating efficiently and effectively, that PV plant is going to be useless. Okay? Everybody wants to steer away from that because they can get all the tax things on the PV plant. Deal with the issue, put the PV plant on, and you start achieving great reductions in electrical density. 1.16 million. Okay? Now I'll give you the big numbers. Okay, who's a QS here? Who loves crunching numbers? Me then. Okay, fine. I'll enjoy this section. You can all go to sleep. Okay, electrical cost per square meter per month, 18 Rand 35. Okay, that's the base case. What we achieved, 9 Rand a square meter. So we've reduced it by 49%. Okay, going from just under R1 million a month to 457,000 Rand a month. Hey, that's money in the back pocket. Huh? Okay, we now go to the baseline rental. These are rental numbers, these are actual rental numbers. So those of you who want to write down, you can write them down. Including parking, by the way, so when you see 180, that's 180, it's the net rental plus the parking. Rates and taxes you can do nothing about. Utilities are on costs that the landlord charges you for servicing, etc., etc. And the electricity number, 18 Rand to 9 Rand. Okay? We've reduced the gross cost of occupation by from 252 to 243. Okay? But I've signed a 5-year lease, which means I pocket the money. And not only that, I've now got an efficient building operating that is now tenantable by multiple tenants because it meets what? The ESG rating requirements. Hey, working. Improvement costs, 1.16 million. Baseline improvement, 9 Rand 36. I have a 2.43 year payback period, which means for 2.5 years, I'm just getting money back. Huh. What's the base case? Quite good, isn't it? Allocation of capital. Okay, now we go to capitalization rates, and this is the MSCI data, which is so critically important to why we're driving this in the right direction. Cap rates, boom, spike. Green buildings, 8.4%, but I've been generous and I've allowed 8.5%. Now I'm going to tell you why this becomes so successful. The original valuation of that particular building was 108 million. Okay, 25,000 Rand square meter value rate. My improvement cost created 5.6 million Rand in value for that. Okay, which reduces my loan to value calculations, reduces my loan to cost. All of these wonderful things allows me as a business to gear up again. The value creation increase of 5%. I spent 273 Rand a square meter and I created 1.3 million Rand of value out of putting this initiative in place. And that is prior to me putting the tax incentives of 12B and 12L. For those who'd like to look at them, they're wonderful tax incentives. The 27% tax reduction on PV, and the 12L is over the useful life or duration of that asset. You're able to claim back money from tax, which means that that year was even better. Why would we not do it? Oh, time. Oh, it's too much effort. Hey, nobody's really asking for it. Wrong, they are. What's the purpose of doing research if you don't put it into action? Typically we do all this research, just do it the same way. It's not broken. Okay. High performance buildings are fundamental to securing tenants now. That's B grade buildings, A grade buildings, and the new P grade. Let's drive. If you look at Oxford Parks now, who's seen or analysed Oxford Parks? What are their Green Star ratings? 6, the highest you can get. Why? Because they're attracting blue chip commercial tenants. Lean construction, setting everything up front. You don't want to pay for quantities of material that you're not going to actually need. Those of you who are QSs or in the game, civil engineers, etc., you have X amount of 5 minutes. Oh, goodness me. I will go over. Lee can shout at me later. Lean construction, reducing as much material as you possibly can, and then that is supported by sustainable infrastructure in cities. Yeah. Maximizing passive design of buildings. The passive design strategies are features innate to the form and design of the building that channelize available natural resources, in other words, stuff that's provided to us for free, to ensure thermal comfort. These climate-specific approaches, based on the sun, wind, light, and microclimate considerations, can be employed to design energy-efficient buildings. In other words, you use the wind, you use the sun, and you don't have to put HVAC and active systems, use passive systems to cool buildings. In this building here, we reduced the HVAC consumption by 60%, okay, by using passive design. Okay. Then what we did is we got heating, cooling, ventilation, fixed cost, because I've got only 5 minutes left. Modeled, built the PV plant, net zero, achieved. Hey, tick box. You say tick box. Hindsight creates insight, creates foresight. Okay? Data that you pull from this information, creates knowledge, creates wisdom. Learn from your past mistakes, employ them, understand them, and create value. Okay, cost of going green to net zero, 13.5 million rand extra to achieve net zero. Okay, but payback period 25 hours, that's great. Justification for additional cost. Architect, cost of going green. Sustainability, poor architectural design. Probably a developer, the building was never intended to achieve net zero. But we got all the awards. Hey, sorry guys. Collaboration. Not existing, silos. The issue with this project was that all the changes happened in stage 2, the construction phase. Well, we need to get this net zero. We're going to secure a blue chip tenant. We need to make the changes. And we did. We secured the blue chip tenant. But it cost us 13.5 million rand extra. Building 2, that's building 1 in the precinct. They're there, they're at Waterfall. They're Nexus 1 and Nexus 2. Oh, come here. Professional team, we sit here. What did we do wrong? I'm not going to change the brief. I want a net zero building that has passive design strategies in place that then achieves 7,500 square meters, 4 parking bays per 100. You've changed the mindset as to how we are going to deliver this building. The environment becomes the first focus, and we back solve the problem. How do we do it? We model it. We build the conceptual design up front. This is where BIM and 3D modeling and AI becomes so important. This tells us outcomes before we've even gone into the ground. Are we going to achieve these things? Now, let me give you a case study. Extra cost, same size building, huh? 7 million. And you will see from the picture, you might not be able to see it clearly, there are minor changes to the building. Still, facades look exactly the same. There are more vertical passive fins, there's more overhangs, and there's less glazing, exposure to glazing, reducing heat build-up in the building. Justification for cost. Principles of green were designed and incorporated from the outset. The brief was to achieve net zero. Good sustainable design. Well done. Look at that return on investment. From 25 to 47.2. 2.1 year payback period, and I had a 10-year lease. 8 years of passive income. Collaboration. All about visualization and moving forward together. You know about this Autodesk, but the most important facet of this is dashboards, reporting, construction, and data connected. Not going to go into too much detail. Common data environments, the clever people did all that stuff. Ready for you guys, and there'll be more of it later. Creating the commonality. Whole of life sustainability becomes a fundamental approach. How do we get into this thing, and how does that building operate over its useful life? The importance of choice of design and construction materials are being highlighted to identify, quantify, and understand the impacts of the decision-making process, which must aim to influence. I mean, whoever put that ringtone actually needs to go stand in the corner and think about what they've just done. Okay, where was I? Okay, which in turn reduces the effect of the construction phase in the environment. Choices of material also play a role in development of urban heat islands in the operational phase. Incorporated decisions here can result in significant environmental impacts such as waste, carbon emissions and pollution, IFRS S2. Okay. Carbon reduction, whole of life, we try to get down to 100 kgs per square meter. Currently in South Africa we're about 1,450. We're working in the right direction. Okay. This is also being embedded into construction contracts. JCT to new suite, 2024 suite, NEC 4 option X29 can mark significant developments in contractors providing sustainable solutions. They get incentivized for this now. These are coming in to do contracts. This is that important. You can't ignore it. Whole of life analysis. Understanding the beginning, understanding the end, and understanding how you're going to dispose of that asset when it's done, because that is part of the building's carbon footprint. Who's ever done a refit, a new fit out? How much do you waste? Strip everything out. You haven't thought about how you're going to reuse materials. You reuse materials, you save money, you reduce carbon, you do all of these wonderful things. Save our future and save money. Isn't that the right thing to do? And yet there's a commercial case that stacks up behind it. Looking at the whole property life cycle, and every time I do a presentation I try and find a quote that really rings true to me. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. We need to make decisions now that are going to affect the future of people who don't make that choice. We are making it for them. Monitor, understand data that is coming out of your buildings. Understand how it's being made, what the behavior is, how we can tune these buildings to perform the way they were originally designed. What is a successful building? The one that performs the way it was originally intended to. Monitor, understand. EPCs are coming at us. I don't have time for that. I've been shouted at already by that thing. Producing the digital twin becomes fundamental to moving our businesses forward as listed entities and providing audited data to prove that what we have done has been successful. A developer is no longer somebody who sells the problem on. A developer is somebody who alleviates the problem for the end users. Developers and investors are now becoming quite fluid. Create the digital world, and we perform in the real world. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.